Why am I making this video? I guess it would be wise if I told my story at some point. Call it a retrospect of my own life. Something I'm doing for me. Maybe I'll post it later. Who knows what I do? Doesn't matter what I do. No one cares what I do. And not in a cynical way. More like I'm free to do whatever I want. And I've always been free to do whatever I want. And if I felt differently, it's my fault. And why am I making this video? Because I have a lot of things on my mind I want to talk about. I want to talk about my life. I want to talk about my early life. I want to talk about my whole life up until now. I want to talk about how we got here and how long it might take for me to describe who I am and why I'm here. My name is Mark. In a couple of words, I cut hair. I've been cutting hair my whole life, as far back as I could remember. As far back as I've been a conscious being, I've cut hair. I've been a barber my entire life, professional barber since I was 13. Slave labor. We're talking child labor. I feel no one should have to start working at 13. And it wasn't like laborious every day. It was learning how to cut hair as a teenager in a world of adults that just want good cuts. And my earliest memories cutting hair have been at my father's barbershop. He's owned this barbershop for almost as long as I've been alive. And he's lived there. He's been at work longer than he's ever spent at home. And I know my dad through the scope of my dad's business. And my dad's always dedicated as much time as he could towards business, doing whatever he could to make money for the family, to afford a lifestyle that was really outside of our means, but he felt that we needed that, so he spent all of his time at work. I remember as a kid being carted into my dad's barbershop thinking, wow, what a palace. This place is amazing. I love my dad's barbershop. My dad's barbershop happens to have my dad in it, which is great. And I never hated being at my shop until I started working at my dad's shop under my father's tutelage, where he taught cutting hair under an iron hand. And it was sort of, in retrospect, it was a feigned ironed hand, where he would come down hard on me to make the customers feel like the fact that I'm practicing on them shouldn't be acceptable, and therefore he would berate me mid-work in front of a customer to get the job done better. And because at some point, if he were to stop expecting excellence out of me from day one, the customers would start expecting excellence without him there to protect me from their potential outbursts of getting the wrong haircut, getting their hair fucked up. And fundamentally, as a 13-year-old, 14-year-old, 15-year-old barber cutting hair next to my dad, the neighborhood that my dad owns a barbershop in was not a kind neighborhood. These people were suffering. We're going to call it the ghetto. And so all they knew was suffering their whole lives. And then all they came to expect more of was more suffering. And these people brought their suffering and their pain into your life if you happen to have anything to do with their lives, especially if you happen to determine how they look at the end of a haircut. And so, mano a mano, man versus man, any customer of any age would get upset that their haircut came out bad. And so, because fighting is always an option for men, even if I was 13, 14, 15, and even if my dad was right next to me, those adult customers would still blow up and explode if you ruined their hair. So I was taught how to cut hair under the most extreme conditions with the least kindest customers with the highest expectations that paid the least. And my father built an empire of his own serving lowest common denominator, any man's, average man's, even very broke people from the ghetto, people that would argue over $1 if the need arose. And it's not that they were that petty, it's just that they were that broke. And my father sold many haircuts, thousands and thousands of haircuts, because he was a quantity man, and he ran his barbershop like a sweatshop. And so that's sort of where I started my conscious life, was learning how to cut hair at my father's barbershop under intense conditions that would breed the strongest and most loyal of barbers, the most intense barber. This barber felt like every haircut was life or death, because at some point it was. Years later, the story is different, but we'll get to that. We're only at my teenage years, which is where I chose to start intentionally, because that's where I started paying attention. That's where I started controlling my life in any way. And so I cut hair has been the way that I've been able to make money for just about 18 years. As I am now 31, I've been cutting hair for as long as I can remember. And that's not an exaggeration. It's an unfortunate, turn of events. Is I don't wish learning a career as early as 13 on anyone, because no one should be so acknowledged in a field to have experience that far exceeds your peers, because your peers could never turn back time and learn how to cut hair at 13. And my peers, my colleagues, my competitors, whatever you want to call them, fellow barbers, could never compete, because they could never have the same experience, the same variety of experience that I had as a hair cutter, starting off in a ghetto and moving on into other neighborhoods with different texture of hair completely, where I had to learn that style. And then beyond, just evolving with the industry as the industry evolved, I'm a long-term barber. I'm an old school barber, but I'm a young guy. And so technically the math doesn't math for a lot of business owners that end up working with me. The math simply doesn't math. Is that how can this guy know, compressed 18 years of experience working and living inside of a barbershop, how can a 31-year-old have 18 years of experience? It's illegal. That's how. It's not right. And I'm not going to look at this as a victim, because at the end of the day, I've made a lot of money as a barber, and I will continue to make a lot of money as a barber. And, some barbers, unlike myself, have a very long and profitable client list. And I never harnessed or gathered my own client list of diehard fans, rabid fans, people that would follow me anywhere. I don't have that list of people, because I never saw the value in that. Because realistically, if you're a good barber, if you're a great barber, you'll get successful anywhere. Just wait. Just have the consistency, show up every day, be reliable, create a culture where customers can come to rely on your schedule, and you don't mess around with your schedule. You show up on time, you never leave early, you show up on the days that you're supposed to be there. That consistency is what generates a high yield for any barber. It doesn't really matter the quality. The quality is a secondary aspect of how good of a barber you are. The first being, what's your work ethic, and how long are you willing to be consistent for a big enough customer base to rely on you to make whatever amount of money you really wish to make. So for that reason, because you could put a good barber, a great barber on the moon, up in Mars, you could put a good barber, a great barber anywhere, and they will get successful. They'll generate their own customers in time. And that's the fundamentals of the barber game. There is no secret. The secret is just be there enough for people to rely on you. And then when people rely on you, you will see the landslide of customers, a landslide of repeating income. Because if these people love you and don't go away, and if you don't go away, everything stays the same. And there is such a thing as maxing out your schedule as a barber. Maybe some people have never done it. I've done it multiple times in multiple shops. And I know that it's an inevitability. It's a part of the barber game. It's a part of standard economics, business models of all barbershops, is that if you can only supply barbers that'll be there when you expect them to be there, the place will generate money regardless of the quality. That when you add a degree of quality to consistency, you become doubly expensive, doubly valuable, doubly rich, doubly everything. Everything doubles when you start stacking things. But consistency is key, and this is not a platitude, this is not a falsehood, this is not something I made up, and this is obviously something you've heard before. This is a real phrase that really applies to the barber industry. Okay, so I am unlike many barbers for many reasons. I've worked for as long as I can remember in the industry, and I've seen the industry change, and I work in a very non-traditional way of cutting hair. My way of cutting hair is that I'm not in a rush, and I don't have to bang out 1 million haircuts in a day to feel accomplished and to feel successful. What I find more valuable is if I could bang out 3 really high quality haircuts in a day, my job here is done. And how can you make a living? How can you live off of 3 haircuts a day? It's simply a matter of pricing. You know, different barbers have different prices, and they all value themselves according to whatever prices they charge. You have really exclusive barbers, celebrity barbers, that charge too much because they created a value proposition, they created an ambiance and a culture amongst their customers that they can't get what they get from this barber from other barbers. And that's fundamentally true every time, that what you offer is wholly unique and bespoke to the customers. And every time it's different. Physically, neurologically, there's no way for 2 people to cut hair the same way, and therefore it's improper to expect 2 of your barbers, of your cohorts, of your co-workers to work the same and pump out the same quality. The truth is, nobody works the same, and nobody's quality is the same, and it would be poor culture to generate a barbershop where you as a business owner tell the customers that your haircuts are special and that nobody can do what you do, and therefore you have to stay with them. You know, but if you flip the script, if you say the same thing with a twist, which is, I provide what I can provide, and I'm at my level, and other people provide what they can provide, and I can't provide what they provide, and they can't provide what I provide. So if you want something different, try my other barbers. They will be something wholly different. And then once you pitch it that way, more of your customers that rely on you and your skill set might take the adventure, might take the experiment seriously, and try out a barber of yours that, quite frankly, may not have been given a chance unless you created a valuable culture where anybody can thrive, so long as your clientele don't believe, according to you, that your haircut is superior, and that somehow there's an expectation that if you have to try a quote-unquote inferior product, then you're not going to get the same thing. Here's the thing. Customers don't need to hear the word inferior to assume that's what you meant. And so you have to be very careful with the work culture that you generate amongst your existing clientele in order for your services to be interchangeable with other barbers that work with you. In the most freest environments, customers don't necessarily have to have a preference for a particular barber, right? And that makes it so that if your barber's not there that day, you can still get a good haircut without expecting the same thing. However, what most business owners, barbershop owners do religiously is they create a false sense of security with their work and a unfortunate sense of insecurity with other people's work that they happen to hire. And so this is an unfairness, an unjust, improper action that too many barbershop business owners employ that ends up hurting their brand by not suggesting that you can get something different, wholly different, with someone different within the brand, and that's okay. That because most customers don't know that it's okay to try out another worker, they will never will. And that every barbershop should have a plaque that delineates the culture that the owner wants to generate, which is all my barbers are quality approved and have fit the bill according to me, the business owner. Is that how can you hire people that you can't trust to take your own customers? That means obviously you're hiring the wrong people. You know, if you can't trust them with money and you put cameras by the register, then you're hiring the wrong people. If you can't trust them with your business, then stop hiring the wrong people. At the moment you start hiring the right people, you don't have to have so much concern that these people might steal from you or might represent your company in the wrong way. Is that your company culture is entirely beholden to what you let the customers believe, okay? And some workers may not be up to snuff. Maybe they don't cut hair like you do. Maybe they never will. And how are you supposed to deal with that? Just keep going in the same way that all the other business owners have been going, which is like running the numbers game and letting people fall into your coworkers or the people that you hired, your fellow barbers' chairs, and then finding a lesser result because they expect the same result. And it's impossible. How can you get the same result out of two different people that have lived two different, wholly different lives? And so it's the positioning of the culture that determines the culture, and that if there's no positioning, the customer determines the culture because of the things that you leave out and the things that you choose not to promote. Okay, if you have a much weaker barber, use that advantage and try to explain that this advantage could actually be, and use this disadvantage rather as an advantage. It's flipping the script and making things more viable for you, so that your customers don't come away from your coworker giving them the wrong haircut. Well, where do they get off? Where do they get off on being so rude as to expect the same level of quality from a different guy? That's rude because of their ignorance to the reality of the physics of hair. That's rude to the workers to have to deal with a bad premise that a business owner set way in advance, way before these people even showed up to start working here. The premise has been set falsely. The wrong premise has been set, and then you suffer. I had some water and I had some time to think about what the hell I'm talking about. Small business owners participate in small business behavior. I talk about who I am and how I came to be only to help further the point that I'm making here, is that I am selling my experience. I am selling my ambition for greatness, for excellence. And I'm selling it in a package that makes it so that you don't have to do all the hard thinking. You know, people don't want to do the hard thinking because it's hard. And most people choose not to think. Most people choose not to look. And where they choose not to look is exactly where they should be looking. You know, is an accountability movement has to happen before a shareholders movement can happen. Before a team can build its essence, it has to have any form of a strong skeletal structure. A strong skeletal structure makes it so that when you start fleshing things out, things aren't so loose and things aren't so unknown and uncertain. Okay? We make appointments. We encourage and enforce appointment systems because this cuts uncertainty from the worker's point of view, is that they know how many customers they're going to take in a day, and they'll know approximately how much money they're bound to make if these people show up. And then on top of that, they still have the uncertainty of potential walk-ins. So there's no true way of eliminating uncertainty in a worker's lifestyle, but there is a few ways to make it less uncertain, where a customer can respect a worker's schedule, where a customer can learn that the culture here is not chaos, the culture here is order, and that order cannot happen without rules that the business owner is entirely in control of, and that rules that end up hurting people are limitations and belief systems that prevent people from having better rules. Is that when we determine that a rule is bad, we change that rule, we change that law. But it takes proof, the burden of evidence, to even confirm that the rule is bad. So I'll give you an example of a bad rule. It used to be that you can't beat your wife legally with a stick that's thicker than your thumb. Okay, that's a bad rule. And we changed that rule to make it so that you can't beat your wife at all. And we had to realize at some point that this was a bad rule because enough people got hurt to be able to have to change the rule. And I understand the idealism of wouldn't it be nice if people didn't hurt each other? I understand the idealism. Wouldn't it be nice? That's so clown-like to even suggest. Wouldn't it be nice if there was no war? But my point is, if it's in your control as a business owner, then you should do everything that would be nice preemptively in order to make things move more cohesively. Okay? Where people can grow the way they are ought to grow rather than the instrumentalized way that you intend them to grow. Okay? So hearing out what your workers want out of all of this is key. And it's not like you have to pay them to do nothing. It's not like you have to give them massive bonuses for no reason. It's more like sometimes the worker knows best, and sometimes the worker experiences something that the owner and the clients don't experience. And that if you can't secure the workers, then you can't have an abundance of customers to have to deal with because there's no workers. It all starts with the owner's responsibility to generate a culture in a vacuum. To generate a type of culture in a vacuum that they can then invite people into this culture where everything is considered and nobody loses and nobody gets hurt. Okay? And what most people do in a vacuum is they make things most ideal for themselves and then expect everybody to follow suit because it's been working this way so far. And so it's the refusal of change in the face of change that comes off as cowardly, comes off as fear-based behavior, which you do not want to lead your life based on fear. You want to base your life on certainty, on courage, on some semblance of a positive outcome, where instead of telling yourself, oh, I could lose this if I do this, I fear that this could happen, it's like, focus on the upside, retard max, get to the point where you have to make a certain change, and then deal with the consequences of any particular change with no fear as to what might actually happen, because you simply don't know and you don't have the data points, and it would be silly to try to predict the future based exclusively on the past. Is that there may be not enough data points that the past can any kind of illuminate anything about the future. It's inadvertent thinking and it's inadvertent problem solving that creates the opportunity for great growth rather than stagnant growth. A steady incline rather than tremendous, insane growth. So if growth is your mission, fine. If stability is your mission, then you have no business listening to me now, because stability is not my game. Stability is a falsehood. An illusion that you convince yourself is real, that actually could get taken away at a moment's notice and you have no recourse. And so what are you really going to do when the worst possible thing happens and you have no backup plan? Is you're going to make something up, and you're going to be extremely unprepared because you never thought of what's the worst thing that could happen. Okay? You only assumed that the worst thing couldn't happen, and therefore I'm going to keep things the same. Okay, well, I had to say it to you, but if both of your legs got eviscerated out of nowhere and you can't make it to work anymore and the whole place collapses because you can't make it to work anymore, what's your plan then? Are you just going to let the whole place collapse, or are you going to at least sit at your hospital bed and open up a laptop and try to make your business work from the hospital bed? Most people don't take this option into consideration because generally and physically, people are too broke to take a month off of work to be able to figure out how to properly do things. Is that they're always in a end-to-end, ends meet type of scenario where they have to pay for next month's bills today in order to not have an overdraft fee, in order to not have utilities taken away from them, in order to not have their rent, increased, or whatever the consequences, the negative consequences of not having enough and not showing up to work far outweigh the negative consequences of trying things and experimenting and having things blow up in your face. Because having things blow up in your face in a controlled manner is better than having things blow up in your face in an unexpected way. Okay? Is when you do something risky, you take all the things into consideration and you put all the cons to the side because you've already figured out what would happen when the cons come about. Is that when you obliterate every obstacle as to why you can't do it, then all you're left with is the deadline as to when you should do it, when it should get done. Is like, it's always a matter of when, not what. Okay? But then if you're gonna ask me what is it, well, let's ask a better question: is why? Okay, why are we doing this? Is this going to do anything for anything? And if you have a strong why, then the what doesn't matter as much. It doesn't matter what you do. And I started this saying, it doesn't matter what I do and no one cares. And that's true. And in your business, in your little barber business, oh, look at this. 2 competing barbershops right next to each other. One of them's doing well, the other one's doing not so well. The second one you saw, this one, is doing a little better. They had a lot more time to establish themselves. The second one down there, this one, they're doing a lot worse. They had a lot less time to build, and they built their brand on quote-unquote Dominican barbers in a white area. Well, wouldn't you have it that people don't necessarily want Dominican haircuts in a white area, and that the place that is also a Dominican barbershop but doesn't express itself as a Dominican barbershop is seeing a lot more of the work, not because they've been here longer, but because they simply portray themselves differently. And it's all about positioning. It's all a matter of context. Contextually, you may be right if your growth pattern is stagnant and like kind of the same, stays the same and has a slight boost. But if you want to times 10 or times 20 or times 5 or any multiplier that's more than like 20% increase gains, bro, like people don't understand gains or the way they understand losses. A potential loss to them is game breaking, that they can't even consider how much better they'd be off with those potential gains, right? It's a gamble. Everything's a gamble. You get in your car, you gamble that someone's not going to T-bone you and end you up in a hospital. So where do we draw the line with how many gambles we take in a day? To what degree is what we have to lose in the scenario. And that if you're a business owner and your argument is that you're always taking the most risk, well, then you're also you're putting yourself in the crosshairs to make all the most money. All right, so you can't complain that you take the most risk, because you are the business owner and everything is your fault. Even the things that aren't your fault are technically your fault, because your workers aren't intended to fix your problems for you just on the behalf that they're being there. Okay? Your workers, your cohorts, your co-workers, people that choose to work with you are buying into your vision, but then when your vision is put under scrutiny, it has to stand up to the test of scrutiny, and it has to be sound. Your vision has to be like attainable, okay? But if your vision is too low, if you're aiming too low and you're not aiming to ×2 or ×5 or ×10 your money, then you're only ever gonna get small incremental positive changes until you eventually get to the levels you could be getting if you make just bigger moves. And then when people want more and they don't do more, they are confused why they're not getting more. And it's like, I've talked to too many barbers, too many workers that don't intend to own a shop and don't want the responsibility, but want to show up to a place where it's already busy, where all the work has already been done for them, and they just need to show up and fulfill the infinite amount of work that the business owner has generated. I've met far too many barbers like that, and to some degree, I am that type of barber. Because why am I expected as a worker to generate all the leads? Okay, if I don't have the tools, if I don't have the budgeting, if I don't have the time to generate all these leads, that's the owner, business owner, putting the responsibility on the workers irresponsibly. And how many times is that gonna fly before all these barbers like myself, who haven't had 18 years but will eventually have 18 years, will also get to a point where I'm at, where I don't have to work, where I'm rich enough that I can take months and months and months off to just sit back and enjoy my toys and do what I do naturally and still make money without having to lift a machine, without having to lift a finger. The question is, how did I attain maximal freedom as a barber? Well, I figured out my worth. I earned my worth, and I don't take less. I don't take no for an answer. So why work at a place where they charge too little for your own sake, and that you now have to choose to work for less if you think you're worth more? Go work for more, charge more, do what you have to do, and don't let anyone stop you, right? This is extremely motivational and potentially explosive, potentially toxic to you as a barber. If you really want to make it in this industry, you're better off doing the smart thing, which is build a clientele list, be consistent, get better, get good enough, and save your money to be able to invest it freely. And then you can rely less on cutting hair and do more with your time, because you don't have to cut hair, because the hair that you do cut is worth more. You buy back your time. You charge more because your time is worth more. Then you buy back your time. You can spend more money on things that make your life easier. You can buy back your time. You can take months and months off of work freely without dying of starvation. And realistically, it's really hard to die of starvation, because if you go to a food pantry, if you go to a homeless shelter and you look homeless enough, they will give you food. It doesn't have to be good food, but you don't have to starve. You don't have to starve. You don't have to starve you don't have to live to survive anymore. Is that the survivability function has been removed from day-to-day life, and that because we don't have to survive so hard anymore, we attribute great danger to things that can't actually kill us. Things like rent, things like not having enough to spend on fun time. That is a danger, a sacrifice that we're not willing to take, because, how do I put it? We want the things that we want, and we don't want to sacrifice the things necessary to ultimately be able to freely have the things that we want. So we put ourselves under shackles, we put ourselves in debt, we spend beyond our means We spend on useless things that we don't need, and we end up with way less money as a result because you charge too less, you don't make enough, and doesn't allow you to spend as much as you want to, right? What kind of life is it where you don't actually get to buy as much life as you think you want? What kind of life is that? That's a life of suffering, a different type of suffering, a life of self-preservation under the guise of potential danger. And the dangers have all been wiped away from first world life. The danger of dying homeless, starving is gone. And you don't have to live with that anymore. And, universal basic income. Who needs that when there's enough social systems to make it so that you don't have to starve, right? That universal basic income would just be a cherry on top to make it even easier to survive, right? That universal basic income doesn't actually matter in the face of how easy it is to actually survive if you decide to own nothing, if you decide to have no job and remain homeless, but not in the decrepit mental illness way, nobody talks about healthy homelessness is a choice of some people where, for instance, if I gave you $1 billion gajillion, you wouldn't live in one particular place for too long. You would have 10 houses and you would be traveling amongst them, traveling the world, places unknown. You'd be rather homeless in the sense that no one place would be your home anymore because you're not limited to one place. You're an international citizen just by the size of your bank account. And then your definition of home changes according to how much money you have. You are homeless if you truly believe yourself to be homeless, and you are helpless if you are truly believe yourself to be helpless and you can't get out of it. Then it's true if that's the way you believe it. But you can be homeless and not helpless. You can live off of the fat of the world, the first world, and not have to starve. And this is very philosophical and very argumentative. And to the point that I'm making here is, since we don't actually have to try to survive anymore, and that we don't have a reason to have to try to survive anymore, it begs the question, what is left to do? What is worth doing? Since I don't have to try and survive anymore, what is worth doing with my time now that I have all my time in my hands and I don't have to work a 9 to 5 and I can just live in a homeless shelter with the same shirt and the same pants and the same socks? I don't have to have more than one article at a time. Is that when one is already done and I can't wear it anymore, I go to a thrift store, I spend $3 on jeans, and now it looks like I have brand new jeans, but I didn't have to spend $36 on brand new jeans. I only had to spend $3. And if you ask me how hard it is to get $3 nowadays, bro, you just look around on the floor, you'll find $3 eventually. You'll find $3, you'll get some brand new pants. What's the big deal? Since this is the world we live in, since you don't have to be a homeless with a drug addiction, since you don't have to be homeless with mental illness and you can survive, what is available for us to do? What can we do with our time once all of our time is given back to us? It would seem that you are free to consume as much as you want. However, there's no societal demand on creation. Aside from replacing yourself in terms of population, there's no instinctual societal encouragement for you to go and create something for you or for others to enjoy. There's no societal function where you can go to a place and they have all the tools and all the material available for you, kind of like a library, except like a workshop in every regard. Like if you think of a master craftsman workshop, a place where they have every tool and they've paid for every consideration under the sun, not unlike a library, not unlike your basic public utilities, where they paid for everything and they allotted money to keep that place going, a place where random individuals can walk in and work on anything they want to work on because the facilities are there. You know, almost like if we were to elevate the idea of a library to its highest potential ideal, is imagine a university with every faculty, every possible utility available for free, right? College for free. That means education becomes less inherently valuable if college is free, sure. But it's not that you get a diploma or a certificate of authenticity having gone to these public utility workshops. It's more specifically to at least have the option where if people can become successful enough to win back their time from the time machine that is society, that eats people's time, in order to maintain society, time and maintenance has to be put in, right? And you as a anyone, not even just a barber, like I'm kind of expanding this to more of a philosophical thing, is you as a worker of any type, if you're given all your free time, what do you do with all your free time now that's now available to you? Do you just sit back and play with your toys? Or do you decide, you know, maybe I should get some tools instead of toys? And maybe I should do something with these tools. You know, people that have entire workshops just for their hobby, for the craft or the thing that they want to do, these people are fully actualized, fully satiated. Their work doesn't interfere with their ability to afford a workshop, and their workshop doesn't interfere with their ability to work. And we should envy people that have workshops of their own, because they build something for themselves where they get to do exclusively what they want to do and nothing else. And it's great because no one told them to do that thing. It's entirely of their own volition. And you know, people don't pay attention to what people choose to do of their own volition. Is that your hobbies and interests, the things you take up your time with that have nothing to do with work, that have nothing to do with family or people, the things you choose to do with your time, your hobbies and interests, better define you as a person than any other regard in life. Is if you love arranging flowers, if you love doing something that wasn't there before and now that it is after you've invented it, and you feel a sense of satisfaction from it, your value is far more greater than someone who is locked into the rat race, has to work all the time. When they're not working, they're dealing with family. When they're not with family, they're barely able to take a shower and watch some Netflix and do some doom scrolling. And that's their lives, their hobbies and interests, consuming media, right? And at no point does the average human have time to create anything, let alone media, let alone interesting media. Regular people, 100% of the population, everyone is a consumer. Every single person is a consumer. No one is exempt from consuming. Where we put our value is creation. Our celebrities happen to be creative people, happen to be athletes, people that do things that other people can't do. And much like Peter Parker, I will say this: you shouldn't have to apologize for being the smartest guy in the room. Is that if you happen to be the smartest guy in the room, you should try to find a better room to where you are no longer the smartest guy in the room. And then once you surround yourself with people that are far smarter than you, and you're no longer the smartest guy in the room, then we'll see how you fare against people that are significantly smarter than you, and you no longer have the intellectual advantage versus everyone. We'll see if your point of view holds water to people with much more significant, different point of views. Their point of view is significantly different than yours, and they could be smarter than you in a lot of different ways. And the question is, how do you compete with those people if it's going to be in the context of a competition? How do you provide them any value if they're all smarter than you, right? And nobody thinks about that. Am I the smartest guy in the room? Why am I the smartest guy in the room? Why am I constantly the smartest guy in the room? Why can't I find rooms with smarter guys than me? What's wrong with this picture here that I can't get myself into rooms with smarter guys than me? And ultimately, when I get to that room, what will I even talk about? What's my point? What's the mission statement here? Is that if I ever get to any position of power, with great power comes great responsibility, right? And I handle it well, right? My point, I've kind of lost my point here because I'm making too many points. Is that there's too many points to look at. And the whole thing is responsibility triumphs over a sense of happiness. Because when you're 80 years old and you have a house and a big family and you have multiple businesses that are making you money in the background and you don't have to contribute much energy to maintain those businesses, and you bought all your time back and you get to spend all your time with your family, your value is massive because you took on a lot of responsibility. You, just like my dad, took on a lot of responsibility. And the results should speak for themselves. If none of us have died yet, his job is done. As long as we survive, as long as we live and not starve, his job is done. But if his children thrive, or don't thrive, that's a different question. Survivability is the game, but the game has been changed. And now survivability is no longer the game. Right now, it's like, who's got the longest measuring stick? Is how much can you quantify within yourself, within the world, within what to expect, how the world to perceive you, right? Who gets to determine your value? At the end of the day, it has to be an agreement. It has to be a transaction. If you value yourself too low, that's all you'll ever get. And then when you overvalue yourself for long enough and you conveniently get a good customer that will willing to pay, you'll be pleasantly surprised and you'll try to figure out what made that guy specifically, with all his money and all of his choices, pick you, and why he paid you more than you thought you could ever earn. And then you delve into that psychographic, you figure out what makes that person tick, and what about your value proposition, be it high, extremely high, what about your value proposition made that rich person try it out? And the fact that you can't look at life from a rich guy's point of view because you are yet to be rich is the reason why you are yet to be rich. Ultimately, what you want to do is pretend that it's already happened, and then you can get yourself into the mindset of the psychographic of your best customers. Is if you promise them the world, but you expect the world back, you have to deliver the world, and you will get the world. That's the way it works. And so, on that note, on this crazy shit, this long ass jit, we started with where I started cutting hair and how and why, and we ended with where I'm at now, where my business philosophy supersedes anyone else's small business behavior because they simply couldn't accomplish the things that I did, and they can't be me, and therefore I ask for the price that I ask for. Thanks for listening.